Hey guys, this is Muhir and today I'm going to be giving an overview of inflation. Talk about how it works, how we calculate it, and then talk about its impact on the Canadian economy. Before we start, we need to know what inflation is. What is inflation? Well, inflation, its general definition, is the rate at which the level of prices for goods and services rises, and with that the purchasing power of money decreases. Purchasing power plays a major role in our everyday life. In this example, I'm going to be talking about purchasing power of a $5 bill when buying a poutine. In year 1, with a $5 bill, you can only buy a large-sized poutine. However, in year 2, you can buy a medium-sized poutine. This shows how inflation decreases the purchasing power of that $5 bill. Now, when you talk about inflation, there are two types. One is called monetary inflation, which is the amount of money produced in a country within a year. Then there's price inflation, which is the general inflation that we speak of, which is the increase of price of a product. Monetary inflation can, however, lead to price inflation. Now, inflation isn't always increasing, sometimes it's decreasing. When this happens, we call it negative inflation or deflation. When this happens, the purchasing power increases instead. To give a better example, take Bob. Bob goes grocery shopping once a year with a $500 bag. With this $500 bag, Bob tries to buy everything he needs for life. So, food, electricity, he has to pay for everything. And this is included in a CPI basket, the Consumer Price Index basket. This includes every necessity. This basket costs $500, so he pays it with the money he has. This is year 1. However, year 2, Bob isn't as happy as he was the previous year because he comes back with the exact same amount of money, $500. Except this year, the CPI basket, which includes everything he had last year, costs $525. Now, this $525 is an increase of $25 from the previous year. This means Bob has to make a decision. He either has to remove one of the products or pay more money. Now, this $25 increase is a 5% inflation rate, which obviously isn't a good thing for Bob. Now, how do we calculate inflation? Well, there's two methods to calculate inflation. One's called the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, and the other is called core inflation. The CPI is the basket that holds all the necessities. This core inflation is also the same basket, however, it excludes 8 of the most important components. They exclude these components because when one of them is placed, they have a very high potential to change the entire basket. For example, when gasoline inflates by 10%, it can have a huge effect on the basket as a whole. These 8 components include intercity transportation, so buses and cars, and there's tobacco products, so selling cigarettes in stores, there's mortgage interest, there's gasoline, fuel oil, natural gas, vegetables, and fruits. These are very important components that are excluded just to see how much the other products have an effect on it. The CPI, however, is the one that we use to calculate inflation. CPI basket may have a couple of mistakes. For example, when you're buying computer screens, you can buy computer screen A and B in year 1 for $1,000, and those same exact A and B screens for $500 in next year. Now, do you calculate the increase of price of those same screens, or do you compare the other way of calculating CPI, which is buying computer screens A and B in year 1 for $1,000, and buying screens C and D for $1,200, completely brand new computers? Do you calculate the average of new computers or the average of those old computers? Because of the mistakes that we make when calculating CPI and the many other factors, the inflation rate is always changing. Within the first 4 months of the year, in Canada, the inflation rate has been within 0.4% to 1.2%. To control inflation rate, a country often has a central bank. In our case, in Canada, we have the Bank of Canada. What they want to do to keep the inflation rate within the range of 3 to 1%. They want to do this by increasing or decreasing interest rates. When the inflation rate is too high, they can increase the interest rate and lower that inflation rate, and vice versa. Now, by doing this, they can have their ideal inflation rate of 2%. This is what they believe is the perfect inflation rate for our country. Now, the following video is going to talk about the really high inflation rate that happened in February.
The cost of living in Canada was up 1.2% in February. That is the biggest monthly increase in more than 2 decades. Our business host Scott Peterson here with the details. What's behind this jump? First off, Scott.
Well, if you're feeling a pain in your wallet every time you fill up, it's no surprise, and it's not your imagination, because month over month, the gas prices increased 8.4%. That's the biggest spike in gas prices since 2008. Energy costs are up, and that's making everything go up, basically. Transportation costs, big month-over-month reversal to the upside. Auto costs going up, and to break that down even further into food costs, meat up 3%, fruit year over year up 7%. So there's a lot of movement here, and as you say, this is the biggest monthly gain in over 20 years since the tax was imposed back in 1991. Take a look at this overall chart, and it shows you the blip up towards the right of your screen, and that is a dramatic spike up. It's well off the over 3.5% back in 2011, 2010, and it's certainly not the depressionary spiral downwards, the deflation numbers that you saw there back in 2009. So at this point, it's good in the sense that the economy is growing, people are working, they've got more money to spend, but it's bad in the sense that it could be a foreteller of prices going up in the future, not just now.
So what do economists have to say about this spike in inflation?
Well, they're saying that January was a particularly weak month, but economists in the Bank of Canada look at the core rate, and that too was pretty hot, 1.4%. 1% was the expectation, so higher there. Royal Bank believes that the core rate should stay below the 2% level until about 2014. The Bank of Canada has a target of about 1 to 3% for its core rates at 2%. So at this point, we have been warned repeatedly by the Finance Minister and Bank of Canada to get our debt levels down, that interest rates are not going down, they're going to go up, and this is the first indication of that, a little bit of smoke to warn everybody that prices could be going up a little bit after this.
Now this next video is about the very high deflation rate that happened in April, just 2 months after the inflation.
When you were pumping gas into your car in April, did you notice you saved a few cents? Or how about on that car itself? Did you buy one any cheaper? Because it was on the back of lower gas prices and auto prices that Canada's inflation rate dipped lower in the month of April. As Statistics Canada reported this morning, the annual inflation rate fell to just 0.4% in April. That compares to 1% in March. And that's softer than many economists expected. To put it in context, that's the slowest pace in over 3 years. The Canadian Consumer Price Index also fell in the month, and part of that was caused by lower gas prices, which saw a decrease of 6% on a year-over-year basis in April. But gas prices weren't the only driving factor. Other categories such as food and restaurants and clothing, for example, were also down. The measure called core rate of inflation, which strips out the volatile items like gasoline, and that's the one that helps guide the central bank, came in at 1.1%, again lower than expectations, and March's figures. The Bank of Canada is broadly expected to hold its benchmark interest rate at 1% until late next year, or even into early 2015, given the economic outlook and the kind of inflation numbers we've seen today. Economists said Friday morning that the data out today reinforces this outlook. There's no real pressure on the bank to raise its interest rates this year. But for families across the country, a little easing on the prices they pay for staples like gas and food is a welcome reprieve, considering Canadian households are broadly digging themselves deeper and deeper into debt. Although there's even been some good news on that front recently, with the Bank of Canada saying homes are making progress in tightening their spending.
This occurs because most of the products in the CPI basket start inflating, causing a general inflation. When, for example, the demand and supply of gas starts increasing, we start seeing an inflation. When an inflation occurs, banks like the Bank of Canada starts highering their interest rates. When the inflation rate is above 2%, Bank of Canada will actually higher our interest rate in order to decrease inflation to the ideal 2%. If you take a look at this chart, you can see that the inflation rate in Canada in 1970s up to the 80s was actually very, very high. In 1975, the inflation rate was as high as 15%. Now, since we're born in the 90s, we're not quite aware of these extremely high inflation rates. We're living in an economy where inflation rate is very low and very stable, so we're not quite aware of how high the inflation rate can reach. So I hope this video has been very educational in terms of understanding inflation and how it works, and by paying close attention to the Canadian economy, we can hopefully prevent this high inflation rate. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it.